I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I feel like I'm on top of the world.
Disclaimer, you will not be transported to the top of the world. In the unlikely event you find yourself at the Arctic Circle, seek shelter from the elements immediately to avoid frostbite and or hypothermia. Geico will not be responsible if you find yourself in a cave or crevasse with a lonely abominable snowman, who in all likelihood will force you to play games including but not limited to Go Fish, charades, Chinese checkers, or his personal favorite, Red Rover, send Yeti on over. Geico is not liable for any damages, either physical or emotional.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
This is the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast.
Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Golic and Wingo. Glad you are starting your day with us, and some of you starting your 2018 work week now and your work year after slacking off and not being here on New Year's Day. But we were here, and we're glad you're here with us now. Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2. Presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Trey Wingo, Mike Golic, and Mike Golic Jr. Well, you know what, guys? Heading into the semifinals in college football, the talk was, the SEC, 2-5 in bowl games. And when push came to shove, and in one game especially, it came to pushing and shoving, it didn't matter because the two teams in the SEC will meet in Atlanta next week for the national championship game, Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, we had this once before in 2012. We had it was Alabama and LSU played. This was when it was the old BCS system.
So ancient, Mike.
So yeah, I know exactly. So this has happened before as far as two teams playing for the title from the same conference. But you had 5 SEC teams playing yesterday in the 5 bowl games, and 3 won the 2 last night, and then South Carolina with a win over Michigan. Again, we have other bowl games that we'll talk about as well. But I have to say this, Mike. I do take umbrage with the headline on our own ESPN.com. Georgia, Oklahoma, show us what a CFP semifinal should look like. This is a former defensive lineman reading this title. No, it didn't. I mean, listen, I was entertained in that game and all that, but deep down in the defensive side of the ball for me, you know, a 54-48 game in double overtime does not sit well with a former defensive player. But boy, oh boy, was that an entertaining game.
Yeah, no, it puts butts in seats, though, and that's what you worry about now that we have the national championship setup that we do, because we're devoid of that one singular offensive force that we had in Baker Mayfield in this game. We had the Heisman Trophy winner going in there that we knew was going to deliver points because he was just that good. And then we saw, for anyone that hadn't been paying attention, that, oh, by the way, Oklahoma has some pretty good pieces around him in that offense, too, that went to work. And it gets interesting now to where we go with this in the national championship setup, because you mentioned it. You're going to get what you want in this national championship. There are going to be some defense in this one. There are going to be some studs on the defensive side. But when we look at this now, that matchup that you brought up before, LSU-Alabama was a rematch that season.
Right.
In 2012, in that 2012 BCS game. It was also the 3rd lowest ranked BCS game ever up until that point in the 12 or 14 year history of that. And so now that we've got basically the SEC title game in the national championship, how's that going to play, especially coming off what a great night yesterday was? I wouldn't be shocked.
What you think this will be a low rating?
Absolutely.
He just mentioned Georgia and LSU when they played.
Alabama and LSU.
Alabama LSU 2012 was a rematch from earlier that year. It was the third lowest
up
rated
until that
BCS.
point in the history of the
this won't
BS.
be a rematch, though.
No.
I understand.
We're just saying.
Yeah.
It's the SEC.
Still an all SEC title game?
I don't think so. No way. Not after. Look, I know you guys are a little upset. You specifically are upset. That was one of the more entertaining games I've ever seen in my life.
No, I agree. We're talking about the title game.
I understand that.
Do you think the ratings will be down?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
I think because of what we saw out of Georgia and the way they were able to do a bunch of different things, I think people will be very interested in that game. And I also think that the Alabama contingent is going to bring it strong. So I don't think it's going to be a low-rated game at all. I think it's going to be – look, you want to talk about what makes a compelling watch is contrasting styles. We had 2 completely contrasting styles getting in those 2 semifinals, and that's going to be the big part of the championship game.
Well, I mean, you're going to have 2 of the same styles in the championship game. You're going to essentially have two teams that want to build their system off two great defenses and running games.
Running the ball.
You're going to have them try and beat Alabama the way almost no one else has been able to do it, which is with a former Nick Saban assistant as a head coach. He's 11-0 against them and beats them all by double digits, and they rarely ever get beat by a pocket passer. And Jake Fromm's not going to grow dual threat overnight in this.
No,
until if he's the one to break the paradigm, you let me know. But they're going to try and run into the brick wall the way LSU did for years, and that's why Les Miles is going to be sitting in like a coach's room or something on one of these sidecasts.
That's what I'm going to love, though, about this is it is difficult to run against Bama. They're one of the great picket defensive lines and front sevens you'll ever see. They know how to take care of their responsibility because they trust the process. So they take care of their gaps. But, boy, I tell you what, Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, what they can do and what they bring, the long runs yesterday. I mean, so to your point, Trey, that does make it intriguing. They don't have one good back.
No.
They have two good backs.
Kind of like Alabama.
And when that line is on, that line, I think, blocked so well against Auburn in the SEC championship game. They did a nice job last night, but I thought they did better against, in my opinion, overall against Auburn from an offensive line standpoint. But that's going to be the draw. Can these two running backs in that offensive line dent that man defense? That we saw. Both those defenses, quite honestly, the Clemson defense, it's not like Alabama was a juggernaut on offense. They had a pick six and another interception that
set them up
close
like at the 25-yard line. Yeah.
So it's not like Bama went out and scored a ton of points in this one. So both these, I tweeted at one point, man, both these D lines, they're scary men out there. Scary men who are going to be playing on Sundays.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of guys that we saw last night that are going to be catching checks for a long time in the NFL on Sundays and Mondays and the occasional Thursday night game. By the way, Golic and Wingo reminding you that we will be live next Monday, January 8th from Atlanta for the College Football Playoff National Championship. We want you to get in the zone with us, AutoZone, and we'll get into the Rose Bowl a little bit later. But I think, like some of us who have to get up early, most people may not have stuck around.
Started a little late,
to see what happened in the Sugar Bowl between Alabama and Clemson. And it just felt like from the beginning it was men versus boys. Alabama got off to that quick 10-0 start, and until Kelly Bryant had a couple of big runs, I think one of them on 3rd and 13 to get their initial first down, it just felt like, man, this one team, Alabama, is playing with a little more thunder than the other team. Did you guys get that feeling?
Healthy and hungry is a dangerous place for any Alabama team to be, and so with that time off to prepare, because remember, it wasn't even just the normal layoff after the season leading up to the bowl. It was also they didn't play in the SEC title game for the first time in a while this year. So you add all that up, and then you have Nick Saban, I'm sure, chirping them all along the way that you guys put yourself in this position to be doubted, and now everyone doesn't think that you're the dominant program on the block anymore. They're ready to give this to Clemson, and you've got to take it back. And we saw they listened.
Well, what was his line? Arrogance is the worst thing. I mean, it just went off on how much you start. It's not as good as the rat poison line, but it was close. It was close, basically saying arrogance is what's going to take us all down.
And we saw in the last 2 years, even the Clemson loss 2 years ago, and then the win, they put up tons of yardage and points against Bama. And that team last year that won, and they showed right in the beginning of the game the differences from Wayne Gallman, what he rushed for last year, what Mike Williams, the top receiver, was last year, and what it was this year. And no comparison. No comparison. So you thought, okay, it's still Clemson has the excellent defense, but could the offense keep up to what it was last year? No Deshaun Watson either, though Kelly Bryant has done a nice job this year. And you know what it showed. They just did not. Bama was dominant on defense, but Bama's been dominant on defense the last 2 years that we saw Clemson put up over 500 yards in those games and win one of them. Bama's defense was dominant, and Clemson does not have the offensive horses that they've had the last couple of years.
It was really interesting to watch. Alabama sort of just absorbs what people throw at them and suddenly uses it against them. Alabama was moving the ball in that first half on offense, using tempo on offense, using bubble screens to their running backs and stressing the edges of that defense, doing all the things that we traditionally see teams try and do to Alabama when you know that running into the teeth of it is not necessarily in your best interest. So for the best team, one of the traditional best teams in the last decade, to continue to try and find ways to reinvent themselves is a terrifying prospect.
Well, it certainly is for everybody else. And as much as they did move the ball, and actually Jalen Hurts, which we can get into, was very efficient throwing the ball, 16 to 24, a couple of touchdown passes, one to a defensive lineman, which we'll get into later.
Yes.
This is exactly how Nick Saban wanted to win this game.
It was a ferocious effort by the defensive players, and we did what we had to do on offense. We tried to shorten the game a little bit and run the ball and keep the ball away from them. And I think it was a great team effort, and I think everyone on our team contributed to that effort. But just ferocious competitive spirit by our defensive players. And Clemson's got a great team, and they do a great job. And I was really pleased with the result that we got out there today.
That's a great word, ferocious.
Yeah.
They held Clemson to 188 yards. They sacked Bryant 5 times in this one. Watching that defense, let me tell you what, after watching the first game, I had to really calm myself down to say, as going, where the hell was the defense? Well, I got my fill of it in the second game, especially on the Alabama side. They're just, I mean, you don't know what to say, but they have obviously great athletes. They get a lot of the 5-star top guys. I get it, but you still got to go out and play. And the way Saban prepares them defensively and their discipline, Mike, is one of the most impressive things to me. Before they even just beat you with their ability, just the fact that they one-arm rush you at times, but with great leverage and get by, and their quickness and their strength, their discipline of gap responsibility and playing as a unit, to me, is second to none.
Well, and the way they hold each other accountable. Great story someone told about the Alabama practice last night on the broadcast was involving Raekwon Davis, who we just saw on the highlight for anyone watching on ESPN2, 6'7", 310-pound monster. Reminds me a lot of my former teammate Stephon Tuitt as far as dimensions and athletic ability.
Who is now obviously doing very well for the Steelers.
Yeah, things have gone all right for him, as I imagine they will for Raekwon Davis, who started this season off getting shot in the leg, by the way, and still coming back and playing in the first game. But there was a story about in practice, Raekwon Davis, a guy who talks a lot of junk, and Minkah Fitzpatrick, their all-world defensive back, called it on it and said, you talk more bleep than anyone else. Why don't you just shut up and make plays? Imagine telling Raekwon Davis anything he doesn't want to hear. Looking at that monster and saying that, but that's the confidence that these guys have on defense, and that's the standard that they have. You get your job done, or we're going to let you know about it. And so he went out there and did, and everything was good.
He did. Yeah.
Well, he was one of them. I mean, he did, and then Daron Payne had the unbelievable interception and then had the toe tap for the touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about a guy who, if you're going to make the word a 3-syllable word, an athlete.
Wow.
He certainly looked like that on that touchdown catch. And what was interesting, Mike, you and I were talking about this, senior, I should say, before we came on the air, was that sure looked like the pick play that Clemson used to beat Alabama in the national championship game a year ago.
Except they did it with a 6'2", 308-pound lineman.
Yep.
As you saw, another D lineman, I believe, was on the field at the same time. He's the one who ran the pick. I think it was 2 D linemen. Yep. I believe he just ran in and blocked, and then it was Payne who just went out to the corner and made the catch and toe tapped. He got an interception as well off basically. The quarterback, Bryant, got hit and the ball went up in the air and he caught it, but he ran about 20 yards with it, scooted a couple of would-be tacklers. Pretty impressive athletically, these guys.
Yeah, that combination route there is the only one in the country that's sponsored by reminding you to take your diabetes medication along the way. Like, that was the fattest combination route maybe in the history of football, taking full advantage of that 1-yard rule, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. You were allowed to have that pick within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. Hey, you know what? It worked. Bottom line. It was the jumbo-size pick play.
And if you give him credit, I believe it was Quinnen Williams. I think it was 92, I believe, who kind of ran the block. So you had 2 D linemen basically running a pick play. It was impressive.
It was Bama's version of the hungry pig right play for Dontari Poe, basically, for Kansas City last year. So that worked out, really well for Alabama as they won 24-6. And move on to the national championship game. Well, they will await Georgia. By the way, just so you know, the guest we have coming up today on Golic and Wingo, Tim Hasselback at 7:30 Eastern will be here to talk NFL and the playoffs and all the latest coaching moves. Trevor Maddich will be here at the 8 o'clock hour to talk about what to expect now in the national championship game. Bruce Arians, who had a very emotional decision to retire. And by the way, they put up on Twitter, the Cardinals did his speech inside the locker room after the win over Seattle. If you haven't listened to it, get a chance to listen to it. It was pretty amazing. He'll join us as well, and Louis Riddick will join us for the final half hour of the show to break down all the front office moves and looking ahead to the postseason wildcard weekend in the NFL. But the Alabama-Clemson game was the nightcap, the dessert, if you will. The main course was Georgia and Oklahoma, and boy, did they put on a show.
You know, it lived up. The way that thing started out, too, with Oklahoma just up and down the field. I mean, you thought, this one's going to turn into a blowout. And Georgia was hanging there. They'd get the big runs. I mean, incredible in this game. Touchdown runs for Georgia, 75 yards, of 50 yards, of 38 yards. It was pretty amazing what they were doing from running the ball. I think they ended up with, 317 yards rushing the ball to Oklahoma's 242. But I was doing a lot of like I expected Georgia to really dominate running the ball, and it took them a while to get going. Because you always think, Mike, okay, and you could explain this as well. You play in a national championship game, but that game got away from you guys early, and that's what I was wondering if it was going to happen here, because you think you want to get a couple of series in before everybody kind of settles down, to then kind of play their game. But in doing so, it was Oklahoma that was pulling away, and to me, one of the turning points, and I hate it, the ridiculous squib kick at the end of the half. I hate this.
Wow.
I hate the squib. Forget the fact that it was just done poorly, and it was executed poorly. I can't stand the squib kick. It gives Georgia the ability to kick a field goal right at the end of the half to make it 31-17. Now, I know they had a lot of ball to play after that, but I thought that was just a horrible execution, a horrible idea to do it. But I thought it was going to get away from Georgia early. But, man, you want to talk about momentum. When they got it in the second half, they made the most of it.
The third quarter was a huge swing in almost every way, shape, and form. And it was interesting what Oklahoma went away from. You mentioned the squib kick that basically made Georgia's kicker Blankenship an internet god.
Absolutely,
the glasses-mustache combination from
Fantastic.
hell.
What a great look.
Yeah, exactly. He gets to live forever now, so I'm proud of him. Congrats on becoming internet immortal. But then in that second half, what had worked really well for Oklahoma in the first half, they pushed the pace on them. They pushed it in a way that not necessarily what Oklahoma had done all year, but helped mitigate a really talented defense. In the third quarter, they went away from that. And Dad, you talk about this all the time with defensive linemen. With a great group, you don't want to stifle what they do best, but you also understand with a quarterback as talented as Baker Mayfield, you've got to adjust. And they kept the integrity of that pocket. They kept him from ever rolling out and doing what he wanted to do, to the tune of 5 sacks through 3 quarters. And a lot of that damage was done in the third quarter, where he was falling into defenders because he had nowhere to go. Because as talented as they all were, they said, we're going to keep him in here because we know that's the easiest way to help our whole defense be better.
And there's going to be a lot of talk now going forward that Baker Mayfield has done about the next level,
which we will get into.
We'll certainly get into more than that. But one of the adjustments that Oklahoma made is in coverage, and they were making Baker Mayfield throw into tighter windows. Something, let's just say it, you're not used to doing in the Big 12. Okay, that's just the truth.
They are very large windows in the Big 12.
There are bigger windows, and when the windows get smaller, and I even tweeted that out last night, when the windows got smaller, he got worse. And people are saying, well, that happens to everybody. Well, no, it doesn't. Better quarterbacks throw better in tighter windows. I mean, that's why you end up getting better quarterbacks that go to the next level or are playing in the next level. And you found that out about Baker Mayfield, or at least you saw it last night. When he had the chances to make the tight throws, he was off. He got, I'm not going to say he got rattled, but he was getting pressured a lot by that Georgia defense.
5 sacks through 3 quarters.
They were making him throw into tighter windows downfield, and he was not executing that well.
And that's going to be a big discussion, as you said, for him going forward. Not only that, but everything was off play action instead of a sheer drop back. You can't wait for people to be open in the NFL. You throw people.
Got to throw them open.
You got to throw them open and hit them in spots. And he did that a couple of times in that game. But no, that was a consistent issue for them. But he was able to make plays with his legs. But going back to what you said, the squib kick obviously turned it around. The 56-yard field goal started at 17 unanswered points for Georgia that allowed them to tie it. And then I thought what Kirby Smart said right before he went into halftime was perfect. And I can't remember who he was talking to, but he said, look, we just didn't play our best 30 minutes. Let's go in there and play our best 30 minutes and see what happens. And Kirk Herbstreit, who was on the call of the game on the ESPN side, talked about the halftime adjustments that Kirby and Georgia were able to make.
Kirby Smart, who has a great reputation for getting his team when he was at Alabama to make adjustments along with Nick Saban at halftime. He obviously did that. He got his team motivated. Their defense took the field to start that second half. They sent a message to that defense, let's get the ball back to Jake Fromm. It's exactly what they did. And of course, they were able to go down and score in a hurry. Now, all of a sudden, you're down 1 possession. So I thought those sequences of series were really significant to what eventually allowed Georgia to come come back and win the game.
Yeah, he's not wrong there because obviously the squib kick went right to somebody, which allowed them to kick, by the way, the longest field goal in Rose Bowl history. There were a lot of firsts in that game.
There were.
Most points, most overtime, longest kick, biggest comeback, 17 points. But then not only you always get that little boost of momentum right before the half, but then to come out with 2 straight 3-and-outs.
Well, that was huge.
Suddenly Georgia's like, they're not going to go right through us on every possession.
The Butkus Award winner, Roquan Smith, for Georgia, was stifled a little bit in the first half. And, man, he came out in the second half, and he was smoking people and earning that Butkus Award in the second half. I thought it was interesting, and I'd like you to explain, as an offensive lineman, I thought the Oklahoma, and I saw you even tweet it, their linebackers being out of position and making the combo blocks and the linemen going to the second level almost easy blocks. Because we were seeing Georgia rip off some huge runs.
Yeah, bad eye discipline, I think, is what it comes down to, and that's why you window dress in an effort to confuse. When you've got multiple guys running with the motion man going across, and all of a sudden you give a group that's already a really solid offensive line. Like, the difference between these two is Oklahoma's going to be real good when they can get on edges. They'll run a lot of gap and power plays, a lot of stuff like that. Georgia's just going to try and roll off the rock and blow you off the ball, and they do that pretty well despite being an undersized unit. And so when you move out of position against a zone rushing attack that's designed to attack a defense that works multiple gaps, and you open one of those up, that creates a cavern. And we saw multiple plays, saw that check when it was spread out where 2 linebackers end up backside on a play, and you skate for these huge gains. It makes it next to impossible to stop when you're not gap sound, and you've got an offensive line that's designed to exploit
And
that.
one of the long runs, the motion came across, and the backer went as well as the
safety,
DB, and the safety as well opened up the huge hole in the middle. So some undisciplined play there on defense certainly helped out Georgia at times.
Look, at the end of the day going forward, it's going to come down to this. Can Georgia do what they want to do on offense, or is Alabama going to be able to do what they want to do on defense? That's going to determine this game. And we always, look, the shiny objects are the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, and that's fun, and we enjoy it. Oh, look, distracting. But at the end of the day, any football game comes down to this.
This is trenches.
Can one wall of men dominate another wall of men, which allows everything else to happen? And we can pretend like that's not the case. That is always the case, and it will be on display in the national championship game next week in Atlanta.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
Trey Wingo and Mike Golic Sr. All right, you were talking about who's going to rule college football. Well, we know that either Alabama or Georgia will have that title after the championship game Monday. Well, we will be there on Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2. However, as our friend Stephen A. Smith might say, who's launching his national show today on ESPN Radio, UCF did cap off a perfect season yesterday by beating Auburn 34-27 in the Peach Bowl. Auburn, of course, beat both Georgia and Alabama, who will play for the national championship. So UCF deserves their shot, right? Well, here's their head coach. Well, not anymore. He's not anymore. He was their head coach when he said this, Scott Frost, who coached them yesterday, even though he's off to Nebraska.
I was afraid to say much about the rankings and everything because I'm a little superstitious, and just when a coach starts running his mouth, that's when you lose the next game. But it wasn't right. I was watching every week the committee sit in a room and decide this 2-loss team must be better than UCF because UCF's in the American, or this 3-loss team must be better than UCF. It looked like a conscious effort to me to make sure that they didn't have a problem if they put us too high and a couple teams ahead of us lost. They don't know, now we got to put them in the playoff. Well, we just beat a team that beat 2 playoff teams and lost to another one by 6 points, and we beat them by 7. And Auburn's a great team. I'm not taking anything away from them. I give them a ton of credit. But these guys deserve everything they get, and they deserve more credit from the committee than what they got.
He's not wrong, I don't think.
Well, I mean, with 4 teams, it's just not going to happen. You go back to Houston a couple of years ago when they were undefeated all the way until November 21st. When they lost to UConn. That was their only loss of the year. They ended up beating Florida State in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So they were kind of in the same position. But before they lost that game to UConn, they were ranked, and this again was by the committee, 19th.
Yep.
So if they'd have beat UConn, they played 2 ranked teams after that and beat them, Navy and Temple. They'd have moved up some, but would they have moved up higher than 12th where UCF ended up? I doubt it. So I think the only way a team like this is going to get in is by expanding the playoffs. And I'm not saying expand to 8 just so a team like this can get in. I've been on the expand to 8 for a while now just because I would like the expansion to 8. But how it can help for those that were tweeting me the simple math of Well, Golic, if you expand to 8, they were number 12. They're still not getting in. You're missing. The point is, if they go to 8, there's going to be parameters, right?
Correct.
More parameters than there are now. I know, Mike, you keep talking about, because you were down there a couple of years ago and going through the process of what is supposedly listed that the criteria is. But if they go to 8, there may be some hard, fast criteria. You may take the 5 Power 5 conference champs. That might be automatic. You may take 2 at large, and you may take a non-Power 5 if it's undefeated. You may put in stipulations like that, which would give a team like UCF a chance, or the highest rated non-Power 5 a chance if you go to 8 teams. So that would be one, in my opinion, one of the benefits of going to 8 teams is giving a team like UCF a shot.
I just don't know what the goal is anymore, to be honest with this.
Get the best teams in a chance to play for a championship.
So if that's it, then why am I asked to care about conference championships?
Well, see, that's the thing.
Right.
I think that if they go to 8,
right,
you'll probably have the top 5 power conferences, right, with an automatic,
yep,
right? You win your conference, you get in, and then it'll be the other 3.
But I'm saying that doesn't necessarily make you one of the best teams in the country.
And I agree with you. I'm not saying if they go to 8, they should do that. I think that's what they probably will do, because I'm with you. If you got a committee picking conference championship, you can make a criteria, but it doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all automatic. I agree with that.
No, because to me, it's about who you're playing. If you beat another very good team in the midst of a very good season, that's awesome. But if I'm supposed to care about your conference championship that matters only to you guys in your conference, I'm saying that doesn't mean much to me. If the idea is we want to be representative and make sure every conference feels like they're involved in this because so many people are mad that the SEC is dominating this championship sphere, then you don't care about picking the best teams. You care about making everyone feel good. So if that's the case, we should make sure right now in this 4-team playoff that we take a conference championship from 3 different conferences, and then if we have an undefeated group of 5 team, we automatically put them in, and then see what happens with that, because you won't get the 4 best teams,
I don't like
but
that.
you'll make everyone feel good.
Yeah, and we're not about that. I agree with you. I'm
so sick of those cries, man. No one wants the best teams. They just want to feel nice.
Well, I think that there's a little gray area in what you're saying there. I think there's some middle.
No.
I think there's some middle ground there.
But do you think if they go to 8, they should take automatic conference champs? I don't.
Well,
I don't necessarily agree that I think it should be into the mix and should count heavily toward it. But I don't think it's the automatic end all be all.
No, but I think that the committee has been a little less than transparent sometimes with the way they feel about certain things.
I agree with that.
For example, at one point they say conference championships matter, and then you look at this year. Yeah, I got it. Ohio State had a terrible loss at Iowa, but at the end of the day, they still won a championship in their conference. Where you look at how they performed in the bowl season. And I know you don't put a lot of stock into that,
no,
but the Big Ten represented themselves very well in this bowl season.
They did,
and I think that look. It's not going to happen next year, but I do think expansion is coming. And someone who really wants it is Danny White, the UCF AD.
National champs, undefeated.
I love that. On the
awesome.
field after the game?
After the game.
If I'm them, I claim it. I make the banner now.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
What a day, what a show, what a time.
I tell you what, a great sports night last night. No doubt about it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everyone, Mike Golic here. Support for the Golic Wingo podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS, consumeraccess.org number 3030.
We're glad you're with us on ESPN Radio and ESPN2. So, obviously, one of the big things that happened over the weekend was the Buffalo Bills ending that playoff drought of 17 years, the longest active playoff drought, not only in the NFL, but in every sport, major sport in North America. And let's just say that the Bills fans have been a little ecstatic. We saw some of the video, even the ones at Hard Rock Stadium, where the Bills fans were at Miami watching the end of the Bengals game, in which Andy Dalton on a 4th and 12 from the 49-yard line threw a touchdown pass to Tyler Boyd with 49 seconds left, which was the game-winning score, which you combine that with the Bills clinging to life for their win over the Dolphins. They really need to work on their onside kick skills against the Dolphins, as Miami did that twice against them. But regardless, they won that game, and those two combinations put them into the playoffs. So the Bills put out a big tweet thanking the Bengals organization that are sending them wings.
Which is awesome.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But Bills fans themselves have done something which is really cool.
This has been really cool. Andy Dalton noticed he has a foundation, and he has he can check on his phone the donations, and he noticed that there were a ton of donations coming in after the game, and they were in $17 increments. And the $17, as it turns out, represents the 17 seasons between playoff bursts for the Bills. So he's getting a ton, so much so of those donations, over 2,500 donors and just over $57,000 and counting of Bills fans that are donating to Andy Dalton's foundation. So while the wings are cool, and I'd be all on the wings, it's a fantastic thing. This is even better.
You know what?
You're thanking them. It was funny with the wings, but this is doing some real good. $17 at a time, doesn't matter. We always talk with the V Foundation. If it's $1, if it's $5, if it's $10, that stuff adds up. $17 increments is adding up to over $57,000 for Andy Dalton's foundation.
It's fantastic.
Yes,
that's in the last 24 hours. We can't thank y'all enough. And, you give, especially the Bills Mafia, their fans, they can be a little crazy at the games with the table jumping and the ketchup and they're applying something, their passion in the right way, and this is just great. It's really awesome. Now, I would say that I'd like to see a shift now for the Bills because it's been very celebratory about them and their fans getting into the postseason.
Yeah.
Now you have a game to go win, which, by the way, is the Doug Marrone Bowl.
Yes, it is.
Former team that he left, then went in exile for a while, got his way back into Jacksonville. They'll be in Jacksonville. Let's focus on that now.
Each player should take their turn massaging LaShawn McCoy's ankle, though.
That is a huge concern.
There's a possibility that he can play in this game. The way he left that field, you thought there is no way he is going to be back. And obviously they could use Shady in this game to get a win. But just to put a capper on that, because all this money is going to Andy Dalton and his wife Jordan to their foundation. They formed the foundation after he was drafted by the Bengals in 2011. The foundation provides support, resources, opportunities, and life-changing experiences to seriously ill and physically challenged children and their families. So obviously it's a fantastic cause that Andy and his wife are part of, and that's a cool thing. Yeah. A funny ha-ha thing at first of we're going to send you wings and thanks for that, to something that truly can make a difference to some children and their families. So that's a great story right there. I really like that.
Look, and people always say you don't hear about that kind of stuff enough, and they may be right.
Right.
And it's nice for us to be able to put sort of a positive spin on something which was a terrible season for the Cincinnati Bengals, and obviously the Ravens don't care about this at all.
No.
And we understand that, but something positive has really come out of this in a really, really good way. So the Bills fans should be feeling really good about themselves and also feel good about the things that you're doing with Andy Dalton. So well done all the way around. Bills Mafia, standing O to you. Congratulations.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
It was all sort of one big giant Jell-O mold.
It's very interesting where that went.
Louis Riddick joins us, our fine NFL front office insider, former safety and former director of pro personnel for Washington and Philadelphia. We were just having this conversation in the Twitter segment, so I want to get your thoughts on it. I believe Baker Mayfield's going to be the swing draftee. I mean, he's going to be the guy in the first round that's either going to be we love him or we hate him. There's going to be all that controversy about him. Forget the flag waving and the grabbing of certain areas and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Straight X's and O's. What is your analysis right now of Baker at the next level?
Look, I think the thing that's going to scare people, let me just start there about Baker, is, look, he doesn't have all the ideal measurables, so therefore, if he doesn't pan out, people will not feel as though they have the safety net that they would have if they were looking at a guy like Josh Allen, let's say in particular, right? Because that's what scouts tend to look for. They tend to look for, if my guy doesn't work, how can I then say, well, it really wasn't me, it was something that he didn't do to utilize all his physical skills.
Self-preservation first.
Absolutely. I mean, that, because it's a league of survival many times, and I get that. I've done that myself. But I'll say this about Baker Mayfield. If you watch his tape during the regular season, this is a guy who I don't think will have any problem transitioning to a pro-style, quote-unquote, passing attack, because he's a guy who spread the field laterally and vertically. He could throw the ball at all three levels very accurately.
And if you watch him last night, still within the context of their offense. Now, he didn't have one of his best games.
No.
His interception there in the second half was one of those where you go, that's not something you saw him do a whole lot during the regular season. But I think he's going to be a fine quarterback. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. I think he needs, like every other quarterback, though, Baker's going to need to go to someone. Obviously, whoever picks him is going to like him. Whoever picks him has to understand that there are going to be some limitations because of the fact that he is a little bit shorter. So you have to make sure that your guard play is very strong, your pocket play is very strong, and the chemistry between him and his quarterback coach, him and his offensive coordinator has to be where you need it to be. You have to be willing to understand that he's a fiery player who's going to be someone who's a little bit, on the edge, who plays right up to the edge. But I think how he will transition to the NFL, look, that throw that you're seeing right there on the field, rolling left, getting your shoulder square, hitting and throwing a laser in the back of the end zone. You see those all the time in the NFL, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
So I mean, he's going to be just fine. But there's going to be a lot of talk about him. There's going to be some things you're going to have to find out about him and make sure that you're comfortable with. But I think he's a much better passer than what Johnny Manziel was. I don't like that comparison at all.
We were just about to ask you that.
I completely agree.
That's not even a valid
I completely
comparison.
agree. He's going to have to be better than a fine player if you're drafted in the first round, though, for sure. And to me, I think he missed when the windows got tight last night in the second half. He missed him.
Yep.
And we always talk about Big 12, their bigger windows, and I've always brought up, name me the last Big 12 quarterback that's done anything in the NFL. And you want to say it's a bad rap, that's fine, but name me one that goes into the NFL and hits the tighter windows. Now, I know everybody thinks Pat Mahomes is going to be that guy.
Right.
We're going to have to wait.
He looked good Sunday.
He did.
You know what?
And we're going to have to wait and see, but Baker just missed enough of those last night that gave me a little bit, because I love everything about the guy, and I hope he does well in the NFL. I love his fire. I love his passion, but that just gave me a little bit of pause last night.
Yeah, but on the flip side, Mike, I'd say this: during the regular season, I saw him hit enough of those throws to where it doesn't concern me. And maybe last night was just one of those where, look, he wasn't that sharp. When Jared Goff came out of Cal, a lot of the windows that he was throwing into weren't exactly super tight windows, but Jared was very, very smooth, very efficient within that Cal offense. And now that he's in an offense where, I'll tell you what, a lot of the windows that he's thrown into now at L.A. aren't very tight either, because the scheme of the offense is such that right now Sean McVay is operating on a whole new level. And right now offensive play is at a whole new level than defensive play. Offensive play right now I think is a step or two above defensive play in the NFL easily.
I agree. And I think the offensive now in the NFL will help a guy like Baker Mayfield be more successful.
There's no doubt, because you know what? A lot of that talk about the windows being so much tighter in the NFL. Okay, well, I could show you about 15 or 16 defenses that the windows I could walk through. I could drive a truck through. There's plenty of wide receivers who are running wide open, because defensive play is not the same as it used to be when we played. It's just not. It's very passive now. It's very soft.
And it has to be, or guys lose money.
That's right. And you know what? So that's why I think a lot of those old concerns about what quarterbacks will need to do once they get to the NFL, I think a lot of that stuff gets overblown now. And what it is, it's people trying to say, look, I'm not sure about a guy, so I need to point to a few things that may be a concern for him. I'm not really that concerned about Baker.
All right, Louis Riddick with us. We got a minute left in this segment, and we're going to hold you over to the start of the next hour. But real quickly, where does Baker fit in terms of quarterbacks that you think will go in the draft? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where do you think he is?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guys with the idea of measurables, look, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, those are going to be the people who, measurable wise, are going to have everybody most excited. If Sam Darnold actually comes in the draft, it'll be those three probably at the very top. Although Josh Allen, look, I'd be scared to death. If you watch his film, you tell me who you would want between him and Baker Mayfield.
You want to talk about a difference of watching his play, but looking at him,
and that's what it's going to come down to.
But look, he looks like
Trey. He's in that group of four.
Right.
So it's just a matter of where and what people are willing to accept in terms of risk.
And that's going to be the big thing going forward. I always like to say we should have one draft at the end of the season and see how it compares to the draft that comes up after the Underwear Olympics and everything else.
Golic and Wingo, the podcast.
Let's not expect too much. There's only one person out there that's expecting way too much out of this guy too early. We know who that is. It's his father.
We want to bring in someone. We're delighted to have him on the show today. He is now actually the former Cardinals head coach. Bruce Arians joins us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Bruce, first of all, thanks so much for being with us. Is it weird to hear yourself introduced as the former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals now?
Yeah, that really is. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it was a very emotional day yesterday, but kind of calm this morning.
Well, what was it, Bruce, that we saw the clip of you talking to your team? Obviously, this was something you knew and thought about going into the game. What was it that made you come to the conclusion after a pretty successful run there in Arizona?
Really, it was all about family. I said yesterday, my wife turned to me this summer and said, Jake's going to be 40 this year. And I mean, it hit me so hard that how the hell could he be 40? And it was, I don't know, it was all about family. Really, it really was. My wife is a trooper, man. I mean, what she's gone through as a head coach's wife, and she had enough, and I had enough. When did you know? When was this year, this game, the 2 games in before the season started, that it was going to be the end? I wasn't really sure. All the plans were for her to go ahead and move back to as she puts our forever home, and I was going to stay here and coach another year. And until
it looks like we may have just lost Bruce there. Hopefully we'll get him back in just a second. Yeah. But he's an interesting guy, and he has his life philosophy is no risk it, no biscuit, which I love. He's a great guy to talk to. But I've talked to other coaches as well, and they reminisce and look back on the beginning of their career, and then when they get toward the end, of how much they've missed a family. Right. And there's just no way around it. I mean, with that coach's lies and the number of moves, do you have to go ahead while the wife and the kids, depending on if they're in school or not, have to stay behind? Yeah, and thankfully we got Bruce back. So, Bruce, apologies, we lost you there for a second in your train of thought there. So, the new frontier for you is what? Because you have been a guy who's been all about the game and been very successful everywhere you've been with the game. How is this transition going to work for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of anxious to find out. I know I won't be totally retired. Thinking about possible what I could do in the media and learn and start a new career there, and just wait and see what opportunities are out there. And I know that I don't want to be a consultant or any of those type of things. I'll eventually visit the Jets training camp this year and hopefully the Cardinals training camp and have some fun. Well, listen, we'd love to have you. So if you're in the media, we're always looking for people, Bruce. I'm just letting you know. We're always looking for folks at the Worldwide Leader. Little colder here than it is in Arizona right now, so just be prepared. Yeah, I got to have a workout walking across that campus this summer. Yeah, you will. Bruce Arians talking to us, the former Cardinals head coach. Looking at and this is with most coaches, it's incredible because you talked about, and I've worked with so many coaches who have talked about when they look back on it, the time at times they've missed with their family or how the years go by and all of a sudden the kids are grown, just like you said. All of a sudden you realize your son, there's no way he can be 40 years old. I'm looking at, you went to Virginia Tech. Your start into coaching was a GA in 75, and then the stops that you went to 14 different places throughout. Some you went back to the same place, but still a move to go back there. If some young 20-year-old, 22-year-old came up to you and said, "Coach, I am so interested in getting into coaching right now. This is what I want to do. This is my passion that I want to do with my life." What would be the best words of wisdom you could give them? The best words I ever got from our equipment manager at Virginia Tech. So you really want to coach? Build your house on wheels.
That's exactly right, because it will be mobile. But
it's the greatest profession in the world. I don't think there's anything better to build relationships. I mean, quality relationships that last your entire life than coaching. And the bond you make with your players, your fellow coaches. There's no better profession, and there's no better profession than keeping you young than coaching.
That's interesting, as Bruce Arians is with us, because so many people talk about how much it wears them down. Yeah, but you're right, being around those young players obviously puts you in a different frame of mind. And we talk a lot about Bruce these days, quarterback whisperers, guys that have worked really well with quarterbacks and parlayed that into success. You might be the ultimate quarterback whisperer when you look at the guys that you've been able to work with over your career. Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, in the last few years, Carson Palmer. in Arizona. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some other ones. But when you see those first names come to mind, and your book is The Quarterback Whisperer, by the way, what is it about the ability to talk to those guys and get them to buy into what you're teaching them that sort of makes the whole thing work?
You have to build a line of trust. And I don't think that comes in the office. I think it has to come off the field, and really becoming I never wanted to be a big brother or a second father. I always want to be a cool uncle you want to have a drink with. And you build that relationship so that when you speak to each other, you're telling the truth. You're not telling me what you think I want to hear. You're telling me what you're really seeing out there on the field.
Who were the guys your first after you were a GA at Vatech from 75 to 77? The first, when you were wide receivers coach, running back coach, that's at Mississippi State. Started up in 1978 all the way through to where you are now. Who were the guys you looked to when you started your coaching career as trying to maybe mold yourself after, or who influenced you?
Oh, gosh. By far, Jimmy Sharp and John Devlin. Jimmy Sharp was my third head coach at Virginia Tech, and, he had been Coach Bryant's offensive coordinator for 10 years, and it was a very young head coach. But we were a bunch of ragamuffins, man. I was a quarterback and I was bigger than center and right guard, and we're running the wishbone. And every game that we went out there, we really believed we were going to win because of his positive influence on us every day. John Devlin, I wouldn't be anywhere without John Devlin. I got kicked out of high school, and everybody that was recruiting me dropped me, and Coach Devlin stayed with me, and got that scholarship to Virginia Tech, and it was a few years later that I was able to repay that debt and hire him as my assistant head coach at Temple.
Well, listen, it certainly has worked out for you, and I'm glad that Coach Devlin believed in you, and a lot of people now believe in you, Bruce, with the things that you've been able to do. Your life has been about coaching, but you had all kinds of. You were a bartender for a while, and it's sort of. There's been a lot of things that sort of made you the person you were. What were some of the life stories that you could share with us that people may not know about some of the early days with you?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, back when I went to school, you got $15 a month for laundry money. That was the only money I had. My parents didn't have any money to send me to college with. And I worked as a bartender the entire time I was in school for $1 an hour, and all I could eat and drink. And it was a hell of a job. Yeah. But when you sit across the bar from someone, I wanted to be a guidance counselor because I love reading people and listening to people, not talking to people, just listening. And you learn more about people as becoming a bartender than I think anything in the world.
You probably get 3 credits for that.
A lot of schools
doing that. So you take that. So your first head coaching job is 83 with Temple. Now I know it's college and pro, but you're still the head coach. The first time you're running a program. Today, I know you were an interim head coach with the Colts, but then the next head coaching job, pure head coaching, was with the Cardinals in 2013. So from 83 when you were first time head coach to 2013 when you were that head coach again, what were some of the biggest things you learned and maybe did differently from that head coaching point?
Well, the biggest thing I learned from Temple, which it's amazing how close all those guys still are. I mean, when we come to Philly or Washington, I have 15 to 20 Temple guys. I can't wait to go to Cherry and White this year to see all those guys because they're so close. But I learned how to delegate. At Temple, I was the head coach, the quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, recruiting coordinator, fundraiser, and by 35, I was in the hospital twice a week, and literally almost killed myself with that job.
Wow!
And I learned to delegate. And then when Chuck got sick, and I got the job at Indy to take, to take over, I say, just everybody do your job. I'll just decide if we're going to go for it on 4th down. That's about it. I don't give big speeches on Saturday night. And those guys can testify to that. But just do your job. And I learned that if I ever got an opportunity, I could call plays, which I love to do. I would get out of the game if I had to give up play calling because that's the most fun in the business. And I said, this can be done. Trust your staff. Trust your guys to do their job. I think that goes with all businesses. Don't micromanage anymore.
Well, look, no one dial up a lot of big plays better than you over the years, whether it was with Ben or Peyton or with Carson over the last few years. Speaking of that, one of those guys that you've counted on as Bruce Arians is with us talking about his recent decision to retire, someone else may be making that decision sooner rather than later, and that's Larry Fitzgerald. Look, he is an ageless wonder. He continues to produce at a very high level. Do you think he's coming back for one more year?
Yeah, I think it all depends who's the head coach. Who's calling the plays? Do they know how to? He can still play, and if the right person's there and knows how to get him to the game on Sunday, don't overwork him in the spring and training camp, because he can still play at a very high level. And the one thing I'll say about Larry, before you ever talk about him as a player, he's one of the greatest human beings I've ever known.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
No doubt about that. Bruce, last one from me is, you've been in this game a long time. Do you enjoy the game of football the way it's being played today? What do you think of the game today?
Well, it's different. I think the quality of the game has dropped dramatically, technically. How to block, how to tackle, how to play football. But the quality of the athlete is so great, it's saving the game. And, line play is almost non-existent because they never get to practice. They never get to practice playing how to play an offensive line and defensive line anymore.
Well, you're right, and we see that a lot, especially with the draftees that come from that spread offense in the college game, where they're basically in a 2-point stance the entire time, as opposed to getting their hand in the dirt and trying to run people over. That has been a big shift, and that's something you can only work with what you got. Bruce Arians with us. Bruce, we appreciate you being with us. I want to let you go on this note. I don't think people know that you, not Michael Vick, have the single season record for most rushing touchdowns in Virginia Tech history. You had 11 in one year, and Michael Vick's best year was 9. That's got to be a feather in that Kango cap that you wear all the time, correct?
It's amazing. Steve Keim was talking to his kids the other day who are young football players. And, Coach still has a record, and Mike Vick couldn't break it. And they said, wow, Coach must have been really fast.
And I just ran the wishbone. Well, it's a different way to attack. But again, like the lineman.
Never handed off, never pitched inside the 10.
There you go. You were a big guy. You could bowl people over. Bruce, it was our pleasure to watch you coach, and we look forward to whatever's next for you. Thanks for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
This has been the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast. Make sure to subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, and to listen every weekday morning at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPN2, and the ESPN app.
Hello, I'd like to deposit this to checking.
Fate is a fickle master.
What?
The future is uncertain.
Okay, and what's my account balance?
The horizon is cloudy. I see a long, treacherous voyage filled with great peril.
Look, can I just get a deposit slip or something?
A fortune bank teller. Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
I see a yellow-eyed serpent and a low APR.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.